Right, good evening everybody. Welcome to the Development Committee, 13th of December 2018. Our usual evacuation announcement first. Should we be required to evacuate the building, would you please leave the building via the nearest available exit of the chamber. Our assembly point is in the public car park at the side of the Civic Suite. Please don't delay your evacuation by collecting any belongings. Please don't return into the building until given permission to do so by council staff. Please also note that the meeting will be audio recorded, and if you have a mobile, please turn it to silent. Thank you. Just before we properly get started, there is an addendum. Can I just check that everybody has got the addendum and seen the contents? Oh dear. Right, Councillor Griffin, the addendum does cover 3 of the items. Can you make sure you're familiar with the contents before you determine to vote, looking at it as you go? Okay. Right. Okay, apologies for absence then. They've been received in the office for Councillor Mr Shaw and Councillor Mrs Shaw. We've got our substitute members, Councillor Gooding for Mrs Shaw, Councillor FD for Mr Shaw. Our non-members attending, Councillor Mr Hoy, Councillor Stanley, Councillor Mountain and Councillor Ward. Then we have the minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of November 2018. Happy for me to sign those as a correct and accurate record of that meeting? Thank you. Item 5, declarations of interest. Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chairman. With regards to item 6 at the airport, 2 things. I'm on the Airport Consultancy Committee and also the County Council for the area. And with regards to item 8.1, King Edmund School, again, that comes in my division as County Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. Likewise, item 6, the airport, I'm on the Airport Liaison Committee, and item 8.1, I have relatives working at KES, and also I'm the Chairman of Rochester Parish Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Hoy.
Yeah, I don't know whether I've got to declare an interest over Fairways, but I have eaten in their car. So I don't know.
I don't see that as a major conflict. Anyone else? Okay. So just for our visitors this evening, if I just explain how things work. We have our officers present a report, first of all. Then if there is a pre-organised speaker, they're able to speak. We've got 2 over there. Then non-members of the committee are able to make their statement, but they only get the 1 opportunity to make their statement. Then it's open to members of the committee to discuss, to seek any clarifications from officers, and ultimately to take a vote on whether an item is to be passed or not. So our first item this evening is item 6, new airport terminal building at Southend Airport. Oh. Right, okay. I assure you, I came in here at 5 to 7 and I said, is it all working? I was given the thumbs up and we said, well, there's still 35 minutes to go. That time has elapsed and now we've got a problem. Honestly, just before 7, it was spot on. Yeah. Yeah. Just go on. Is it plugged in? either come to life or not, or we'll go a bit further. Members, I'll just adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes while we thump a few bits of electric. We're not having much luck with the device that sends a signal to the camera at the moment. If that device is not going to work, we're not going to move forward down here. So while we're just doing a few more bits and pieces here, we're investigating whether we can get the required information up in room 4. If that is the case, then we'll need a few minutes to reset up there. But if this doesn't come to life and room 4 isn't capable of receiving the signal, then we will have no alternative but to cancel the meeting. So please bear with us in the interim. I need to wait for officers before we continue, but I had just come down to adjourn the meeting. However, don't go near it. Right, have we got everyone? Wait for Sonia. Right, we can only apologise for the delay. As long as no one touches that particular bit of equipment, we believe we're ready to go. So we're at item 6, new airport terminal building at London Southend Airport, Rochford.
Thank you. Chairman, this proposal is for extensions to the terminal building and associated development at Southend Airport. 2 extensions are proposed, one to the north elevation and one to the south. The extension to the north elevation would also feature an enclosed compound to house plant at ground level. In addition here, between the proposed extension and the control tower, an additional area of hard standing is proposed. Take you to the elevations. So the top elevation there.
Chair, excuse me, interrupting. Is it possible we can have this other light off so I can see it clearer, please?
Okay.
So the top elevation on this plan shows the proposed northern elevation would be 2-storey. So that's from about this point here, extending northwards. And the extension would be at the same height as the existing terminal building. The extension to the south is very similar to an extension that was approved earlier this year, and is single storey. This extension would have a part flat, part curved roof. The extension to the northern elevation would have a curved roof. Don't worry about zooming, if you can. The extension to the northern elevation would have a curved roof, mimicking the roof of the existing terminal building, but then would rise up in a sort of wave form to the airside elevation of the building. When viewed from the airside, the 2-storey extension would appear different from the existing building with full height glazing up to 2-storey level. If I can take you to the next plan showing the 3D images. You can perhaps see that quite more clearly here. So the roof form curves and then gently curves upwards, unlike the existing building, and then you've got this 2-storey height glass, and behind a brise-soleil is proposed, just to shield the sunlight into the first floor. The first floor intended for use for various sort of commercial uses and uses in association with the airport. Officers consider that the design and form of the 2-storey extension is in keeping with the existing building and will represent good design with materials matching corresponding parts of the existing building. The compound to house the plant, which is shown, so that's to the north of the proposed northern extension, which is this part here, would be a steel mesh and would complement the modern design of the airport building. The extension proposed to the southern elevation is more functional in design. It would retain the existing single-storey element here with a curved roof and would involve flat-roofed extensions either side. This element of the building is perhaps less visible to the public realm. The proposed extensions, if I can take you to the site plan. So if this line here is the existing terminal building, this is the 2-storey element, and then this is the existing single-storey part, flat-roofed side extensions here, and then this is the 2-storey now extension to the northern elevation with the compound just surrounding. The proposed extensions are significant to the terminal building, but only the first floor part of the proposed two-storey extension is actually additional floor space compared to the extensions that have already been granted planning permission here. The Joint Area Action Plan supports the growth of the airport and recognises that the terminal building would need to be extended. The additional floor space at ground floor is largely to support functional requirements relating to baggage handling. The first floor space is not proposed for specific end users at present, but would be put to uses that support and enhance the customer experience at the airport. There is one slight change to the wording of condition 9 as reported on the addendum, as that condition wording had included some text that was meant for explanation and clarification. So the first sentence would remain, but then the clarification after that would be incorporated partly into the reason for that condition. Subject to the proposed conditions, officers recommend approval of the scheme, which accords with relevant planning policy and the adopted development plan.
Thank you. So as just mentioned, there are two additional conditions, 14.15 and an adjustment to condition 9. Any members wish to speak on this one? Okay, that's good. So the recommendation is for approval. Those members in favour of approval, please indicate. Thank you. That is unanimously approved. Item 7, Fairways Garden Centre, Holmbridge Road, Rayleigh.
Thank you. Chairman, this proposal is for outline planning permission for the redevelopment of a mixed-use site for 16 dwellings. The only matter reserved for consideration at a later date is landscaping. All other matters are for consideration in the determination of this application. The site has a frontage onto Holbridge Road and is opposite the Rayleigh Club. Several residential properties here lie in proximity of the site. If I can take you to the aerial image, this gives an indication of the current use of the site. There are a number. If it won't work, it doesn't matter, because actually this this site plan also gives an indication of the current use of the site. You can see that there are a number of buildings of varying design and scale, generally concentrated centrally, but also towards the northern and southern boundaries. The site is almost entirely hard surfaced, with various storage uses and parking provision dotted throughout. The existing access is positioned centrally onto Holbridge Road. This application, if I can take you to the proposed site plan, please, is a resubmission following members' decision to refuse planning permission for an earlier scheme this year. The previous scheme is currently at appeal with a decision pending from an inspector. The earlier scheme was refused for 4 reasons. One of the reasons for refusal of the earlier scheme related to the loss of business at the site and the loss of employment opportunities. Whilst policy ED1 does seek to support protection and enhancement of the role of small and medium businesses, members will note the table provided in the committee report, which details the level of employment provided by current businesses at this site. The level of employment provided is low. Some businesses have relocated within the district or plan to, and employment relating to these would therefore not be lost. The second reason for refusal related to the location of the site and issues of sustainable development. The site does not adjoin an existing defined settlement, however it does lie almost equidistant between 2 large settlements with sufficient surrounding greenbelt to ensure that the site's redevelopment would not result in the merging of these 2. The applicant has proposed in this application, if I can take you to the next plan, please. So the applicant has proposed in this application to include a crossing on Holbridge Road, a pedestrian crossing, to enable residents of the site to safely cross to access existing bus stops. Members will note this requirement as ahead of term for the legal agreement. A slight amendment is recommended to require a detailed plan to be submitted to and agreed by the local planning authority in consultation with Essex County Council Highways for this crossing, as indicatively shown on the drawings referred to in the report. The provision of this crossing increases the sustainability of the site. Occupants would have ready access to a bus service along Holbridge Road. Can take you back to the site plan, please. Concern was also raised with regard to the earlier scheme in terms of the development being quite inward looking. The change that's happened in this application is that these dwellings here have been turned so that they now face Hullbridge Road and have a more visible presence along this prominent strip. Officers consider that that's an improvement to the scheme. It improves the relationships of the development to the prominent road frontage and results in a less inward-looking scheme. Essex County Council Highways have provided a consultation response and raised no objection, subject to various conditions. Unfortunately, the response was not received in time to be included in the addendum. The Highways Authority raised no objection to the 3 proposed accesses, the existing one and then the one to serve the 2 dwellings fronting Hullbridge Road. I'll briefly show you this is just one of the elevations of one of the dwelling types on the site. These are the same as were previously proposed. The scale, form and appearance of the dwellings are considered acceptable, as is the layout. Finally, concern was raised in relation to the earlier proposal with regard to the provision of affordable housing. Members will recall that the scheme's financial viability was tested in respect of the earlier application and that this was independently examined by the Valuation Office. It was concluded that the scheme could not viably provide 35% affordable housing, but could provide a contribution of some £633,000. The Council's policy seeks, however, that affordable housing be provided on the site, unless this is proved impossible. The applicant has now agreed to the provision of 2 on-site affordable dwellings, and a head of term to a legal agreement to achieve this has been recommended. Subject to the recommended conditions and heads of terms of the 106 legal agreement, including the slight amendment to the 106 head to require a detailed plan of the crossing to be agreed, and the addition of the recommended highways conditions as officers deem appropriate, the recommendation is one of approval.
Okay. Councillor Mr Hoy.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I've got a couple of problems with this, but first of all, I'd like to say I think they have improved what came before us previously, so that's welcome. There's questions which I don't know how you want to deal with, because it might be I want to come back to them if possible, but I know that's not what you like.
I'm afraid you.
I know you're
from where you're sitting, I'm afraid you only get the one go.
The first one is about the Section 106 heads of term A, so that's on page 7.1 under 1.1. So 1.1A on page 7.1 of the report. We have the provision of 2 on-site affordable units, as already mentioned, or the commuted sum of 633,000 if no housing provider can be found. It's, to me, this is a bit loose. Is that within 2 years, 10 years, 5 years? Quite often Section 106 is sort of 5 years, 10 years. This one has nothing. And on what basis? I mean, what control have we got over that? This is all down to the developer deciding if they can find one or not. It doesn't give much comfort, shall I say. And as I understand it, we still don't have a policy for the use of commuted sums. Is that? Are we able to receive the commuted sums? That's that question. So there's 2 questions within that which perhaps could be answered for other members, if possible. The second one was within the report for visitor spaces. It does say that we could, and I accept this and it seems reasonable to me, is that within the landscaping for reserved matters add the requirement to provide 4 visitor spaces. That I can't see that in the report. Forgive me if it is, but I can't see that in the landscaping condition. So could that be possible to be added by a member rather than a visiting member? They're really the 2 points.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Mountain.
Thank you, Chairman. The 2 outward-facing properties, I don't know, is it possible to have that image back on screen? Can you just advise how they are going to access their parking spaces? Do they access them from the main road?
No.
Because that's just a concern if they, it's more junctions on the main road. That was my observation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chairman. With regard to parking, I believe on 4.12, Councillor Hoy's question is answered because it's going to require 32 spaces together with additional 4 visitor parking spaces. I believe that is actually within the document that I'm reading.
Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chairman. Looking at the site itself, I'd like to know, before anything starts, is what the surface water management agreement is in modelling for that site, and also the crossing across a very, very busy road. I'm hoping that will be either a signal crossing rather than a reservoir crossing, which is there at the, or could be put in, as that is not a purpose crossing. So it needs to be a fit for purpose, not just an island in the middle of that road, because that's not sufficient with that many children coming off of that road, because it's very dangerous, very, very dangerous, as you know. That's my concerns, and also how the management of those ponds are going to be, and where that water is going to be distributed to. Thank you.
Okay. Right. Each of our visiting members has had their opportunity. Just before the members start to have their discussion, do you want to cover some of those points? Yeah. Just to see if, give a bit more clarity to the discussion. Thank you.
So, taking them in order. So 1.1a is just ahead of the section 106 term. So it is brief, and there will be a lot of additional wording associated with that, including timings. So there will be requirements for the affordable units to be provided, you know, at a certain point within the development, and there will be requirements for a provider to be found and justification if a provider can't be found, so that the council is satisfied that as an absolute last resort, if you like, a fallback, a payment would be accepted in lieu of that. And the council can accept a payment, and that can be put towards affordable housing within the district, and that again will be clarified in the 106. So it is brief, but there'll be a lot of sort of additional wording and clauses that go around that to ensure as far as possible that the 2 dwellings are provided on that site. In terms of visitor spaces, in the landscaping, I think because it's an outline application, landscaping is a reserve matter. So one of the first conditions is that a reserve matters application would have to be submitted and approved. So essentially the outline is part of the planning consent. It's not a full consent. And parking layouts would all be part and parcel of that, the landscaping and the layout. So we can deal with the visitor parking within that landscaping scheme, which members will see when that reserve matter application would come forward. In terms of accessing the parking spaces, yes, those 2 properties would access their parking spaces from Hullbridge Road. And the Highways Authority are satisfied with that, officers are satisfied with that. Otherwise, what you get in any scheme is development very much inward facing and away, and you don't get a good sort of design and layout of the road frontage, which is important in the public realm. What highways have required by condition, and unfortunately you've not seen the highway response in full, but they do require sufficient space within these 2 plots to enable these cars to exit in forward gear. So that will be one of the conditions. The surface water modelling, yes. So in the report, there is a section on surface water drainage, 4.9 to 4.22. It talks about the drainage proposal that has been submitted. What they're proposing is an attenuation basin. So essentially what they will do is hold surface water on that site, and then it will drain from the site to a sewer connection at a controlled rate. and the lead local flood authority are satisfied with that. There are some conditions that are quite detailed to ensure that happens. And then the crossing. The crossing, the reason why I have suggested tonight that we require some additional detail is that the plan that's been provided, Essex County Council haven't given us the absolute okay to. So what we're saying is we have to have a plan that is submitted and agreed, and it works on the plan that's been submitted as an indication in case highways, for their own safety requirements, require some slight tweaks to the position or the details that have been submitted around that crossing.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Griffin.
Thank you, Chairman. The two bus stops, can they both be reached by a footpath from the estate area? Is there a footpath on each side of the road?
Not all the way along. So the proposal is to have a crossing here or somewhere along this road frontage on Hullbridge Road that would enable the residents to safely leave the site, cross Hullbridge Road, and then get to the bus stop that's on the opposite side of the road to the site. There is also a bus stop on the same side, and there's, outside of the applicant's ownership, some grass verge at the side of the road. So it's not a proper, adopted pavement. But there is the ability for people to cross slightly further down and opposite that crossing. There is some sort of, a bump surface, but there's not a platform in the middle of the road at that point lower down. So what we're seeking to do on this application is achieve a crossing to one of the bus stops, but we couldn't enable them to sort of require an adopted footway all the way along the other side.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Weston.
Thank you, Chairman. Just I'm getting confused with the figures. On page 7.1, under 1.1a, you've got a figure of 633429. Then on page 7.18 and 7.19, you have a figure of 663429. Can you tell me which is the correct figure, please? So it's 4.10 on 7.19 and 4.6 on 7.18.
Clarify that one for you in a moment. Councillor Mrs Hoy.
Thank you. Yet again, we have another developer that's ignoring our policy of 35 affordable homes. So I'd like to ask, when they seek to prove that they can't afford it, do we do that report, or do they have to go and find that report themselves?
Any other members indicating to speak at this point? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chairman. It's not really to do with the planning itself. It's to do with the fact that there's a pending appeal on this site, and it's really what would happen with a decision on that against a decision on this. What's the relationship?
It's not relevant to our decision tonight, but if they get this and they win the appeal, they can choose to develop either, essentially. Over those questions.
Yeah, we're okay. So take them in order. Well, there is a discrepancy between the figures quoted. However, I would say that the report on a number of occasions on pages 718 and 719 references a figure 663.429. So I would think that maybe the figure on 1.1a is typo, and so the actual correct figure should be 663.429. In any case, potentially what we could minute is that the figure should be the figure that was the the difference from the viability report that has been independently looked at. So whilst I think it's 663,429, it needs to be, well, I would recommend that 1.1A is the figure that we have in the reports, and I think we're just trying to source that now. But it needs to be the difference, basically. It needs to be the figure that was in the report that our consultant has looked at.
And the minutes will clarify that should we come to a decision.
It's 663.
663.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And
then
affordable homes.
Yeah, so on the issue of viability, we look at this closely. So on any application where the applicant is not saying at the outset that they're going to provide 35% affordable housing in line with our policy, we require them to go and get a report done that looks at all the viability. So there's a lot of financial information, build costs, there's all manner of information that comes together and ends in a conclusion, which is it viable or not to provide a 35%? And if it's not, then what can the site viably provide? The applicants went away and got their report done, and we required them to pay for it to be independently tested, and the council chose who we wanted to go out independently test. We generally go out to the district valuer, and we did in this case, and they had a lot of questions of the report and of the consultant that had done it on behalf of the applicant. So there's a bit of toing and froing with the district valuer querying things and it going to and fro. And eventually what you get is a district valuer saying to the council that this is what this site can viably provide. And so that's where we're at the moment with this. We can have the 2 dwellings on the site, and we will seek to ensure that they are provided on site, because that is what the policy requires. If that proves impossible, essentially, because a provider is not on board, despite best efforts, then the contribution the council will get is 663,429. And then I think Councillor Smith's already mentioned the appeal, which will just play out its course. So that may be refused, it may be approved, and if there's 2 approvals, obviously it's in the applicant's gift as to which one they implement.
And if they're both refused, they can't do either.
Equally.
Equally. Right, members, we've had our presentation, we've had a lot of questions answered, and we've had a discussion. The recommendation on 7.1 is for approval, subject to the extra information required with regard to the crossing and the discussion with Essex Highways. Can I ask then, those members in favour of the approval, please indicate. 6, 7, 8. Those against. Just so. Can you just keep your hand up for the time being, though? 1. Thank you. That item is approved. Thank you. Item number 8, which is a referred item. Again, there's information on the addendum with regard to this one. This is King Edmund School, Vaughan Close, Rochford, single-storey flat roof building for use as a children's day nursery.
Thank you, Chairman. This application relates to King Edmund School, which is located at the end of a cul-de-sac in Vaughan Close in Rochford. King Edmund School is a mixed secondary school and comprises 6 forms. Planning permission is being sought to erect a single-storey building in the southwestern corner of the school site. The building will be used as a nursery to accommodate 50 children between the age range of under 2s and up to 5 years of age. Like most nurseries, sessions will be held in the morning and afternoon or all day. As you can see from these photographs that I'm showing you, this piece of land is currently vacant from any development and is used as a car park for the 6th formers. So this is one end of the site, the other photographs of the opposite end of the site. Currently, the access is gained from Oxford Road. Cars also leave the site via this access. This access is also used for residents to gain access to their garages. As part of the proposal, it is proposed to lay out landscaping around the proposed building and lay out 18 car parking spaces, 2 of which will be for disabled parking. As part of the proposal, it is confirmed by the school that the sixth form car parking would be relocated to Braes Lane, and the proposed area car parking would be used by the nursery only. The proposed scale, bulk, height and appearance are considered acceptable, especially against the backdrop of the school buildings. Given the single-storey nature of the proposed building and the sufficient distances between the proposed building and the surrounding neighbouring dwellings, it is considered that the proposed development would not create a situation of overlooking, overshadowing or over-dominance. The hours of operation proposed are between the hours of 7:30 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. Monday to Friday. Vehicle movements would occur first thing in the morning from 7:15 a.m. and would be staggered throughout the day to approximately 7 p.m. The open hours proposed and days of operation are considered acceptable and would not have a significant impact upon the surrounding residents. It is proposed to lay out 18 car parking spaces adjacent to the nursery. These spaces will be used by the nursery only. The nursery is proposed to employ 11 members of staff, and therefore the amount of car parking proposed would be adequate and meet the council's adopted parking standards. An access road exists to the rear of the properties fronting Oxford Road and Spencer Gardens. As part of this proposal, the school is proposing to use a vehicle access from Oxford Road to gain access to the nursery and leave the site via the access onto Spencer Gardens. Currently, the site is accessed and exited from Oxford Road. As part of this, access is closed off and has been for 20 years. So it's closed between. I can't point. It's closed between the entrance of the site and near the highway of Spencer Garden.
Can we also demonstrate on the screen we can see, please?
Yeah, can you point? Because I didn't want to blind anyone. Yeah, so at the moment that access is closed at Spencer Gardens, and it's also closed near the entrance of the site at the moment, and that has been closed for over 20 years. Sorry, I've lost where I am. This was resulted as antisocial behaviour problems were occurring in this area. However, residents do also have access to these garages and rear gardens via these gates, so they all have a key to gain access to this part of the access. So, like I say, it's proposed to reopen the access to its full extent, allowing vehicles to access into Spencer Garden from the nursery. This means the gates are currently situated by the application site and near the highway Spencer Garden would be removed. So these are photographs that I'm going to show you. So, so this is the gate at the moment that's in place, and this is proposed to be removed as part of the development to allow vehicles to gain access on Spencer Garden. This will enable the school to create a safe entrance into and to exit from the nursery in terms of highway safety. Additionally, Essex County Council, a highway authority, was consulted and raises no objections to the proposed development. I'd like to confirm that this piece of land was transferred to the school in 2011 by Essex County Council when the school became an academy. If the school were to remove the gates that are currently in situ, permission from the council would not need to be sought by the school. The applicant has confirmed that the site would be locked when out of hours. Currently, the site is used by sixth form students for car parking and used by members of the public during the evenings and at weekends. So locking this site out of hours would prevent this entrance being used late into the evenings and at weekends. It is considered that the proposed development complies with policies of the development plan and the MPPF and therefore recommended for approval subject to conditions. Thank you.
We have Mr. Lewis, who's going to speak on this one. Up to 5 minutes, and I'll let you know when you've got a minute to go.
Good evening, Chairman. As
mentioned, my name is Simon Lewis. I live at 104 Mayfield Avenue in Southend-on-Sea, and I'm here in reference to the said application for the daycare nursery at King Edmund School. I'm speaking for and on behalf of the residents of 2 Spencer Gardens, who are my parents and have lived at the property for 43 years, and concerned residents of 25, 27 and 29 Oxford Road, all of which have formally objected previously to the application and have permitted me to speak on their behalf. We're objecting to the application on the grounds of safety, congestion and impact to the long-suffering neighbours of the school, specifically relating to the traffic movements and opening of access referred to in the application as the Spencer Gardens entrance. Photographic evidence has been submitted previously to back up this situation. So, first and foremost, the application includes the opening of a narrow road of 3.6 metres wide, leading on to Spencer Gardens, which has not been used for public or vehicular access for in excess of 43 years, if ever. So that's vehicular access. So it's also been closed off for the last 25 years in consultation with Essex Police due to antisocial behaviour, burglary and alleged drug dealing. And this was to footfall. If opened, the residents would be left vulnerable to such activities once again. And although we've seen in the addendum that they're going to lock the gates to the entrance, this we feel does not address vehicle movements around that access road from either entrance or exit out of hours. So despite assurance that this exit would be used for the nursery only, there is no details to suggest how this would be managed or policed, and currently there is no such controls. We therefore believe that this will become an extension to the current chaos, with all the users utilising this route, including pupils trying to gain access to the school and out of hours clubs, including caravan rallies. We have documented in excess of 100 parked cars in the spaces served by the Oxford Road access, which is significantly wider at 5 metres. This was witnessed on various days and times, including Saturdays and Sundays early into the evening, outside of the suggested out-of-hours activity times in the application, or the original application I should say. Notwithstanding this, visibility at the junction of Spencer Gardens is poor at best, with a 2 metre high solid fence and garage obscuring views. Vehicles have to obstruct the footpath prior to ascertaining if it is safe to join the carriageway, leaving pedestrians on the primary school route at risk of injury or worse. Both Spencer Gardens and Oxford Road are chaotic, gridlocked and unsafe at busy times, and this would only add to the current problem. As a highway junction, this would contravene the guidance set out in the Essex Design Guide. We're sure you will agree that opening this access will have significant noise and disruption impact on the residents. Residents of Oxford Road will have vehicles passing to the front and rear of their properties. We also feel this would have a detrimental impact on the value of their properties and the residents' privacy. Currently, residents objecting to this application and several others have access rights to Spencer Gardens entrance routes and garages. This would be unreasonably restricted by the traffic and would cause disruption and safety risks to both parties. The application also states there will be no further vehicle impact, therefore we struggle to see the justification for opening this less suitable road. One final point, we're aware that the Braes Lane car park is often empty at weekends and was originally permitted to ease the school traffic impact. If this was used...
Just a minute to go if you need it.
Yeah, okay, no problem. If this was used as intended and enforced, it would certainly ease the existing congestion. We urge you to carefully consider these factors as part of determining the application. We feel you have the opportunity to help the frustrated residents and even improve congestion to these minor roads. We thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Stanley, you've indicated.
Thank you, Chairman. Concerns, as what's been indicated already, is that the vehicles going up and down that entrance that's going to be opened, it doesn't seem to be, for me, wide enough for 2 vehicles. And I'd like that emphasised. It doesn't seem to be. Perhaps you could let me know. But the amount of traffic, how much, how many, I can't remember how many spaces you said that was there, but whatever the case is, coming off of Oxford Road, would the occupants of the nursery be the only ones to allocate the nursery as well as the disabled parking spaces? And would Oxford Road be then congested with parking throughout the day to get to the nursery? Or is there a way for the vehicles to go into the nursery, turn round and come out again, and it's wide enough for the 2 vehicles to pass each other? It seems to me that the garages at the back of those properties in Oxford Road have that right of way, and would that be a disturbance to those garages should they want to use that right of way towards Oxford Road? I can't see. I mean, they've all, from what the pictures show, there are quite a few garages there, and if people was to put their vehicles outside of the garage, they would be blocking the road by it seems. I'd like you to clarify that situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, just before we get going, I'm just going to ask the officer for a little bit of clarity, because I feel that the discussion might get diverted. Can I just clarify that we are talking about a planning application in the area marked within the red line, and from listening to the presentation that the blue line represents the area that is in the control of the applicant, but the actual routes to and from the highway are not part of the application, they're part of a management plan.
Yes, so the application site is that red, but on any application, an applicant does have to show extent within their control to the highway, the adopted highway. So, yeah, the main nursery building is within the red line, but how they're going to access the site in this loop manner, as proposed, is part of the application, because any applicant has to show how their development is going to access the highway.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chairman. Just two or three points of clarification, please. The officer said that the sixth form people parking as sixth formers would be moved to parking to Brays Lane. Can you clarify you mean the Brays Lane car park, not Brays Lane itself, please? Because that would be absolute chaos.
Yeah.
Secondly, with regards to the entrance there, yes, I was concerned the chairman raised a point as to whether we actually looking at the planning there. Can you tell me whether the accesses have already got established planning permissions for use as accesses and exits? And secondly, the large one that comes off of Oxford Road, will that be one way or will that be two way? I'm not quite sure how that's going to work, because those people with the garages there, if that's one way, they're going to have to go around the loop. But if it's two way, people coming in going to be conflicted people coming out of the garages. So I'm a little bit unclear as to how that's going to work. Thank you, Chairman.
We'll take those answers now, because I think
Yeah.
they might make some of the rest of the discussion a bit easier.
Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm that the sixth form car park will be relocated to Brays Lane car park. That's part of the school already. Historically, these accesses were used many years ago to transport the children to the school via bus, and this is where the buses used to park before being relocated to Brays Lane car park. So this is what it's historically used for. There was an application back in 2008 that had reinforced this access by laying out reinforced hard standing, basically, so it could accommodate the buses. So historically, it's always been used as a vehicle access to the school. That's coming in from Oxford Road. The access out on Spencer Gardens, I know that's been closed for 20 odd years. and I believe the gentleman who spoke earlier said that vehicles haven't accessed the site, the vehicles haven't used the access onto Spencer Garden for a number of 40-odd years, but I have no evidence of that. But I can confirm that has been locked up for over 20 years. And on your third point, you said about you have concerns about cars going into the site from Oxford Road and crossing. Within the site, if I show you another block plan, site plan, there is enough room within the site to accommodate a turning circle if needed. That access does measure 6 metres wide, so could potentially have 2 cars crossing at the same time. But again, it could restrict neighbours gaining access to the garages. But then the situation at the moment, sixth form students are using that access as it is at the moment, and whether they're using it as a two-way, I'm not entirely too sure.
Okay.
But
I've got a number of other people. It might get answered in the other questions. So I'll go to Councillor Hookway next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. You mentioned about that the existing gates will be removed, but then there's going to be some new security gates put in place so that out of the time that the nursery is going to be in use, that these will be put in place so that the actual site access will be limited to certain times. Is that correct?
If I clarify, the school are proposing to remove those gates, and as I said in my presentation, that access currently belongs to the school, so it doesn't require permission from the council to remove those gates. The gates in question that are going to be locked are the gates. Sorry, Katie, could you point to the gate access? So it's these gates here that they're referring to be locked. I mean, at the moment, I know that cars do access this site in the evening and the weekend. So from those gates being locked out of hours, that will prevent that situation. In the hope that the cars, anybody using that site out of hours, will then go to Brays Lane and park in the car park.
Carry on.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. So it would seem from what you're saying is there's going to be no restriction on the access roads to the general public. Those roads will be open. It's the gated area to the car parking area.
That's correct. Yep.
Councillor Arno.
Thanks, Chairman. Sorry. Having listened to the members and talking to the officers, and also receiving some communication from the officers with regards to the exit to Spencer Gardens. Whether or not Spencer Garden Gate becomes operational again or not is no major issue to the client or the proposed developer or development. So we've already heard that the proposed changes to the car park, the transfer of the sixth form parking, etc., are being moved to Brays Lane car park. And so, consider if we leave I would like to look at the Spencer Garden exit with regards to putting a condition on the report of the application where the actual fences or the gates remain in place, because this reduces the traffic demand on the site such that the Spencer Garden exit is not critical to the demand or use as stated by the school.
And your reason for that would be?
The reason is from the traffic demands. If we remove it, which will be a nuisance and health and safety issues towards the residents, is my first point. The second point is exit to Spencer Gardens and the restriction of the width of the road going to through to Spencer Gardens, and also the points which have already been raised by the officer with regards to the antisocial behaviour. And I appreciate that if we do remove the barriers, when I can't predict whether that will actually return or not, but the antisocial behaviour which was recommended by the police to actually enclose the exit to Spencer Gardens.
Okay. Right. Okay. We'll carry on with the discussion and then see how things evolve. Councillor Mrs. Hoy.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I wanted to take you to 8.13, number 10, where it says the opening hours for the proposed nursery are as follows: is 7:30 to 9:30, sort of thing, and then Saturdays and Sundays, and it's opening bank holidays, Mondays. But I don't see no condition to say that it doesn't have to open on a Saturday or Sunday or a bank holiday. But then if you go to item 11, it says the hours provided between Monday to Friday reflects the school opening hours. But I mean, I might be wrong here, but I thought the school closed at 2 o'clock.
No. Oh, if I answer that, yeah, your these open hours stated within the report is what the applicant gave me as school opening hours. The addendum does clarify that the nursery is proposed to be open between 7:30 a.m. and close at 6:30 p.m. Monday to Friday. That doesn't include weekends. It will be closed at weekends, and it does say that later in the report that the site will be closed during the evenings and in weekends. The school open hours are to 9:30. That's to accommodate for the evening clubs that do take place there, such as the football and other activities. Thank you.
Thanks.
Councillor Weston.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just a little bit confused about the parking. You said there's going to be some new parking in Brays Lane for the sixth form. Am I led to believe?
I didn't say new. I said they're going to be relocated to Brays Lane car park.
Okay. On 8.13, number 7, it says a new car park will be laid out to the side of the building, and then it says these parking spaces will be shared between the proposed nursery and sixth form students.
No, sixth form students are being relocated to Brays Lane.
It doesn't say that in the report.
Sorry, what paragraph?
813, number 7.
813, number 7.
Yes, that's clarified
Right.
within the addendum, the second bullet point in the addendum. It's clarified that sixth formers won't be using what was originally proposed. They'll be relocated to the existing car park in Brays Lane.
Oh, okay, thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Councillor Gooding.
Thank you, Chairman. My concern was also the car parking area. So the amount of car parking spaces are 18 in total, and if you've got parents dropping the children off, there's going to be an awful lot more spaces required, and there's going to be pandemonium there, as there usually is with any parking spaces for schools.
Okay.
So that's
Okay.
my concern.
Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. As I understand it, the pupils attending KES will not be able to gain access to the school from this development. Can you confirm that, please?
That's correct, yes.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chairman. How many, do we know how many car parking spaces are in use now by the sixth form students?
I do. Let's see. I do something. Sorry, can I come back to you on that point? I do have.
Okay, we'll come back to you. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, the reason I ask is it's to do with the total number of vehicle movements. So it's the number of movements that we've got as of today, with that being used as a car park for the sixth form students, as against the potential number of movements with the nursery.
Difference.
Thank you.
Okay. Right. Is there any members wanting to speak who haven't already spoken? Or start the second round? Councillor Efty.
Well, yeah, as far as I'm aware.
We're on 8.1, number 23. It says it only gives one space for drop-off pickup. Surely that's not enough. If I'm reading that correctly, if that's for dropping off children.
Should we do it?
Okay, right, we'll start the second round then. Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chair. Could we have the drawing of where the entrances and exits are back up on the screen, please? Yeah, I'm still somewhat a little bit confused about this Spencer Gardens access, as to whether that has got established planning permission for use as an access to the site. Secondly, with the number of properties in Oxford Road that back onto that exit, are any of those buildings garages that are in current use? Because if that is the case, then it's obviously been used since then. So I've still got a bit of concern as to whether there is an established use there or not.
I think from what the officers have said, their permission is in place to use the exit onto entrance or exit from Spencer Gardens. However, for a considerable amount of time, minimum 20 years, it has not been used.
But the permission still stands?
Yes, yes. And it's been isolated by fencing during that time. Councillor Hookway.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to get a clarification. Is it intended that the nursery building and the car parking area, which it's adjacent to it, which is meant for that facility, is that going to be completely separated from the rest of the school with some kind of security fencing?
There are fences there at the moment, and there is a gate, palisade fencing in place at the moment. For safeguarding of the young children, that will be locked at all times to prevent the nursery and the school mixing, basically.
Okay, so that's already existing?
Yeah, that's already existing.
Thank you.
Okay. Right. We'll come back to Councillor Yanu then, please.
Thank you, Chairman. With regards to the condition I placed earlier, I would also like to add to the condition that a turning circle is in place in the car park to alleviate a two-way stream of traffic down Oxford Road.
I think the way I'm obviously sensing the way the discussion's going, we're not interested. The principle of the permission for a nursery in that location, the design of the nursery, that's not in question. This is about the management of the egress and access from the nursery. So I think members need a deal of clarity about whether we're talking about actual planning issues, whether we're talking about traffic management plans, how it all forms, because it seems to me that the core of the planning application is not in question here. Did you have a?
Whilst I accept the discussion has gone that this is currently a two-way access route from Oxford Road,
Yeah.
my understanding was that it would become a one-way loop. Is that not the case?
That's the principle of the application. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So, would you like to try and go for that?
The clarification on the access. So at present, the only access point for vehicles to this area is via Oxford Road, because there is a gate here that's been there for a long time. There are, I think, 12 sixth form parking spaces that are used in this location. So we're talking about a slight increase in the number of vehicle movements, but perhaps not, significantly or excessively so in relation to the nursery. At the moment, the sixth form parking would be accessed so via Oxford Road, so there'd be two-way traffic down here. What they're proposing in this application is that parents enter via Oxford Road, drop off their children, and then exit via Spencer Gardens. I think the school have indicated that they don't have to have that arrangement. So essentially they could adopt the same arrangement that they exists for the sixth form students. There is space within the layout, within the red line, for parents to drop off and then turn. So there's a turning circle in the layout to enable them to go back down Oxford Road. I think the difficulty officers have is potentially with a condition saying that this gated access must remain, there needs to be a justifiable planning reason for that. So highway safety issues around access points are, reasons why you might object to an access point. We don't have Essex County Council Highways objecting to the arrangement by which this is proposed.
Okay. So, for clarity, at present, the entrance to Oxford Road is two-way. It's proposed as one-way. The access to Spencer Gardens has been closed. It's been proposed as being opened, going one way. Councillor Ioannou, you've mentioned an additional condition, one relating to highways. Unfortunately, highways would not support us in an appeal situation, and at this moment in time, no one's offered to second you on that one. So I was hoping we've got through. Is it a fresh point?
Thank you, Chairman.
I'm wary of suggestions in that we have to judge the application that's presented for us. It's not for us to modify it on their behalf.
Rather than necessarily supporting Councillor Ilianu's suggestion of making a condition, is it more appropriate, bearing in mind what's been put before us, that we put an informative down with our point of view in relation to the access onto Spencer Gardens, so that we give an opinion and then it's for the school to determine how it wants to take that forward? Is that appropriate?
It would be appropriate, and I would anticipate, regardless of what we do, that the trustees of the King Edmund Academy would be exceptionally concerned about their relationships with their neighbours, and would be on the front foot when discussing how their application would influence their lives. I'd be somewhat disappointed if they weren't giving that active consideration. But, yes, I do take your point. I think that's fair enough. Councillor Cannell.
Chair, another clarification point. We are talking about the red box, and the concern is around access to the red box. But because the application is about the metaphorical red box, they could change their arrangements on access, is my understanding, or they could decide to go in a different direction, making some of this moot. Is that correct?
So we'll just do one final comment before we try and tie this up then, please.
There is a red line, but any application must demonstrate appropriate access to the highway. And so we can consider, does this nursery site have appropriate access to a highway? This is edged blue, but it's in the ownership, so it's in the control of the applicant. So we can be satisfied that although it's not edged red, it is still for consideration, the access to this use, and it can be achieved because it's edged blue, it's in their control. But it is in the school's gift to determine, if you like, because two-way traffic down here, because there's turning within the site, is an option. So it's in the option. It's kind of within the school's gift because essentially either option for planning purposes, officer says acceptable.
Okay. Final go.
I agree with Councillor Hawkway with the point he's raised, and also yourself, Chairman. Based off communications through the officer from the school have not got any. They're not concerned about utilising the Spencer Garden exit, because it's not critical to their demand. So I still think that we should put an option rather than condition to say...
Informative, yeah.
Informative to that point.
Okay, thank you. Members, we have a motion. I'll move the motion for approval printed on 8.116. But to go with that, an informative that does highlight to the school the concern of the council with regards to its traffic management, that it hopes that the trustees of the school will be very attentive to their resident neighbours and actively look to monitor, manage and adapt the situation should it be required. Okay, thank you. Those members in favour of the approval, please indicate. Those against? That item is approved. Thank you. Our next item, item 8, 24 Cedar Road, Rayleigh, removal of condition 3 on planning application, which was a change of use from workshop to gym.
Thank you, Chairman. This proposes to vary a planning condition imposed on an earlier planning permission relating to 24 Cedar Road in Rayleigh. Apologies, but if you can follow the line, the application site is this sort of triangular plot here. The application site is on the Brook Road Industrial Estate, adjoining part of the estate's northern boundary. The site is accessed by car via Brook Road to the south, which links to the High Road and Rayleigh Weir. The site is within close proximity of residential properties on Woodlands Avenue to the north. A single industrial type building occupies the site, shown on the plan in that darker outline. Planning permission was granted to change the use of this building to a gym in 2017. The planning consent was granted subject to a number of conditions, one of which limited the use to one-to-one fitness training and group training for up to 10 people at a time, with sessions pre-booked. It is this condition that the applicant now seeks to remove. The applicant contends that it is hard to allow the business to grow with this restricted condition in place, and that the condition results in the building being underutilised. The applicant would like to branch out and work with overweight children. However, with parents attending classes too, the restriction of 10 persons at a time would not allow for this. The key issue in the determination of this application relates to the adequacy of the proposed parking arrangements at the site. Although the condition was imposed for reasons relating also to intensification of use and impact on residential amenity, conditions limiting noise transfer from the building would remain in place. The applicant has also submitted some photographs. There are a lot, I'll just quickly take you through them. So this is the rear of the building. There's this area here, but as you'll see when we get onto the photos from the front elevation, the applicant isn't able to use all this for parking as well as the front because you sort of block this access to the rear with the parking that you have at the front of the building. If you can quickly, sorry, I couldn't manage to get the photos broken up, so they're all together. So we'll just quickly go through some of them which show the interior of the building, which has been kitted out as a gym. If you can keep going through those. Then this is the front of the site, and you can see that there's parking to the frontage of some of the other units on the industrial estate. There's some parking restrictions, and then there's some on-street parking availability further down. Again, sorry, this is just the interior. You can keep going, Katie. Yeah, so this is part of the frontage, so it's a bit of an awkward shaped plot. So you've got the building and then you've got this parking available to the side. So what have you got? You've got 5 cars there, a couple of vans, motorbike to the front, and then the next one should show the frontage. So again, the applicant has surfaced the front and can park a number of vehicles at the front, but obviously then accessing that rear area, although there's some additional space, can't all be utilised for parking. The applicant has submitted these photos to demonstrate that there is 15 car parking spaces within the site. In the earlier 2016 change of use application, 5 parking spaces were shown to be provided on a site layout plan. The photos clearly show the ability of the site to park more than 5 cars, although it does mean tandem arrangements with some cars blocking others in. The adopted parking standard works on maximum parking numbers for uses such as gyms, subject to the need to ensure adequate provision. For the size of building, the maximum parking requirement will be calculated to be 30 spaces. Given that the greater on-site parking provision can be achieved than was originally considered, it is considered appropriate to allow for a greater number of people to use the gym at any one time. Officers recommend that the condition be varied to limit the number of users of the building to a maximum of 30. If you go back to the site plan, so I think the concern of some residents in and around Woodlands Avenue in relation to the parking issue is that there's this footpath link access up here. So potentially overflow car parking does happen or could happen in Woodlands Avenue with people then walking to access the gym here. Equally, people can access from the south and park in other areas of the industrial estate. Members should also be aware of 32 letters of support the application has been received. These letters refer to the gym helping the local community with health and fitness and the site having ample parking. The letters were received from residents of the Rochford district, but also as well in adjoining districts, generally from users of the gym. One respondent refers to using the gym and parking within the site, or if not, at other times within the industrial estate, when other units are closed and there has been consent allowed for that parking. One refers to the parking at the site being managed well to ensure that space for people attending classes that they're all pre-booked onto. Subject to the proposed conditions, including the variation of condition 3 to allow for up to 30 people at one time to use the building, officers recommend approval of the application.
Thank you. And just a reminder, members, there's one tiny little bit of extra information on the addendum. We have a speaker on this one, Mr. Daniels. Up to 5 minutes. I'll let you know when you've got a minute to go.
Thank you, Chairman. Committee. My name's Mark Daniels. Some may know me, some may not. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, Robert Barber. 4 months ago, I found out I was ill. I had liver disease. And I was told by my consultant that I must get fit and I must go and seek out a gym. And I'd heard about this gym that Mr. Barber had, as you've seen, located in Brook Road Industrial Estate. And I went along. And I have to say I was very impressed in what he achieved with me and what he was achieving with others. And I think it's that achievement that he's done with myself and with others that I said I would come and speak on this application. Because Mr. Barber is in the business of helping people like myself who became ill. And as your officers mentioned, he also wants to help children. We all know, everyone sitting in here, that we're going into a time of increasing child obesity, and having a cap on how many people can visit the gym obviously will have an effect that he won't be able to get so many children in with their parents turning up and supporting their children. So I think it's very important that that cap could be lifted or maybe shifted in some way. We also agree that providing an increase for those who participate could open the possibility of employing part-time coaches to teach these children, particularly maybe like single parents returning to work. It's a great, it's a great business to get into if between those hours that you can work are maybe school hours. Also, I know that Mr. Barber is also interested in maybe teaching someone who is a school leaver to be a coach within that gym. So, but obviously with that cap, you can't have these people in there because there's only 10 people can be allowed at one time. Now, I know there has been some negative comments, but as your investigation shows, within your documentation, there is ample parking, and there could be parking put around the back as well. Also add that many people, like myself, I share a car with my wife when we go. People ride their bikes there, and there's an actual bike rack for people to store their bikes. and also some walk from the local community through that alley that you see. There are people within Rayleigh that are using the gym so they can walk there. And as you see in the pictures, all the cars, because in the planning permission that originally granted, is they are set times. So the cars will come and they will go. There's not ever a backlog because they are set classes. It's not like a normal open gym where people just turn up now and again. And as for the noise, has been proven by, again, your investigation that there is no significant noise to the residents. Probably not as much noise as the industrial estate causes now, to be honest, with the lorries and the comings and goings that along that road. As a council, I know that you support small businesses and entrepreneurs and people who work hard to inject money into the local economy. Members of the gym regularly walk into Rayleigh, and they, particularly in the summer, and as it's quite close, and spend their money in the coffee houses and other businesses nearby, like Base Jump, that's just down the road. I know that quite a few gym members take their kids down there when they leave the gym. So all of these things are injecting money into the local community, and I think it's a great thing. I know Rayleigh Council have sent their objection, but I believe this is short-sighted and sends out the wrong message to those who have the health of the local community in mind. I hope this council and this committee will see the benefits, and even if you can't agree on a cap of 30, I hope a cap more than 10 will be granted so Mr Barber can get his business up and running, because I think it's a very good local business, and it's done me well, and that's why I sit in front of you today. So thank you very much, Mick. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, I do appreciate what the gentleman has said with regard to businesses. I think we always would want to be supporting local businesses to improve and expand. I think when this originally came to council, I think the shame of it was that it's just in the wrong place. And it's always been in the wrong place because it's right on Woodlands Avenue, and it's very near. And of course, with everything that's going on, we know that people may say, well, you bought a house that's on an industrial site and near to an industrial site. But of course, the hours worked on an industrial site are a lot less than these hours. It would be an exception of maybe from 8 o'clock in the morning until maybe 6 o'clock at night, and no work at weekends. So it's the type of thing that would have been acceptable. But as it stands at the moment, I would like members to be drawn to why condition 3 was recommended in the first place, and how important both conditions 5 and 6 are, which I know are looking to be retained anyway. I think where the parking issue came into it, and I'd like to deal with that parking issue because it does affect the members, the residents who live in Woodlands Avenue. But to be honest, I think this is an issue that needs to be dealt with by SEP, because I believe that it's something the residents will need to decide with regard to the parking restrictions if it does increase. So that's something I would recommend that we need to look at. So I would like to take the main reason I would say that I asked for this to be brought before this committee. I noticed that this site had previously been investigated on 3 separate occasions in connection with alleged breaches of conditions 5 and 6 under the application, original application. These cases were subsequently resolved and the respective cases closed. But my first question would be as to, and it's a rhetorical question actually, is why were they investigated on 3 separate occasions in the first place? And my answer would be because those conditions were breached. I'm concerned that on one particular breach occasion, when an excessive noise complaint was being investigated, microphones were placed in one of the houses as part of the investigation, which was abutting the gym. And it's a 5-day investigation. And as part of that 5-day investigation, the investigation team felt it reasonable to inform the gym that they were being monitored for noise nuisance. Now, so it's no surprise that neighbours over that 5-day period noticed how quiet the gym was, with one neighbour wondering if they'd gone out of business. So I feel that on this occasion, I believe that the decision that the case be closed as there was no case to answer was seriously flawed, which again brings some doubt to my mind, and something which I hope you will all consider on how the previous investigations were conducted and were they also flawed in some way. I believe what this committee are being asked to improve is a threefold increase in what is often intolerable noise from the gym, plus the nuisance of increased parking in Woodlands, which I've already addressed with regard to SEP, so I think we shouldn't really look at that. In conversations I've had with the residents about this application, I've been told that both conditions, 5 and 6, are being continually ignored and broken. Surely as it stands, this is in contempt of what this committee had originally recommended to ameliorate the issues that were previously highlighted as essential on the original application. So I would like to suggest that if this committee is minded to approve the removal of condition 3, which the owner argues is detrimental to the ongoing success of his business, which I do understand, I believe additional conditions on soundproofing and air conditioning, which were previously not included because it was considered by this committee could jeopardise the viability of the business at the time, should now be reconsidered in view of this proposed change. And I would also ask this committee to seriously consider revisiting conditions 5 and 6 with a recommendation that periodic monitoring should take place without notice, so as to enable correct and accurate measurements being taken to assess any breaches. Finally, I would ask you to put yourselves in the resident situation, which raises concerns for the long-term mental effects that noise nuisance can cause. Thank you very much, Jim.
Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chairman. What can you say to that?
It's not compulsory.
No, it's not. And I was just... No, very true. All I would say is that I think we have an entrepreneur that wants to make people fitter, wants to improve his business, and in fact, the residents adjacent to him can always go in there and use the facilities as well. As for parking, well, the highway is the highway, and unfortunately, he doesn't control the highway, and neither do we. So that is something for the highways to determine as to how they want to control traffic. The purpose of this increase in membership, I would imagine that he would have more, if you like, not examiners, but trainers to come to the site, will use the site to train their people in groups. Sorry? Somebody said something?
Carry on.
To train those people. And obviously we do have with a problem with obesity in children, and this is probably a very, very good idea to try and get them fit for purpose. I don't see, I mean, the parking area is, if you was to have the same people that are in Rawrith Industrial Estate, where you've got scaffolding going on, would that rather be a scaffold distribution place, or would we have it as that? Because the residents at the back on the Eon site do have that sort of thing, and they start at 6:30 in the morning and don't finish till 9 o'clock at night when they're unloading. So I think on the basis that these people are starting at a reasonable hour and finishing at a reasonable hour, I don't think that's a detriment to anybody.
Councillor Mountain.
Thank you, Chairman. Just, I'd like to get the committee back in mind of what Councillor Ward was saying, and I think the points that were raised in relation to noise pollution and possibly soundproofing and periodic monitoring was very relevant, and I don't know if they could be added as conditions. Thank you.
Okay. Right. We'll move on to members then. Councillor Milne, as a ward councillor.
Just to revisit what Ian Ward was saying, Councillor Ian Ward. As a lodge councillor, I've been down Woodlands Avenue a number of times. And these are very valid complaints. And the other thing is that I would go further than just soundproofing. I'd insist that you have equipment that actually switches the power off to the amplifiers if they go above a certain level. Now, this equipment is regularly fitted into church halls and all sorts of other areas, and it actually physically prevents the racket because I believe the residents. And unfortunately, I also believe this business of monitoring and then informing will result in the volume being turned down. The other problem is, and Ian's right about SEP, is that the parking down there is already diabolical. And there's issues with the county council not replacing white lines, which might come in our area, but people are actually being trapped in their own driveways already. So their concerns are that it will just get worse. And they are really right on top of the place. There's an alley at the side. So I would suggest that equipment that actually monitors and shuts down those amplifiers is insisted as a condition.
Thank you. Councillor Hookway.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to clarify a matter with the officers. On the map provided, it would seem that there's an access road that runs around the whole of the building. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So it is possible that in the first photograph that we were shown with the big piece of hard standing that was had the overgrowth of greenery on it, that's not used currently for parking, that there is access directly onto that piece of hard standing.
Well, there is an sorry.
Yeah, go on.
There is an access track shown there, but there isn't actual access. And I don't know that. So the only on this application, the only bit that we can consider is the red line, and the ownership, the rights of access over any of the other parts is not known at this point in time. So all we know is that the site has access to Sidar Road to the front, and so they can access to the front to this part here, and they can access to the back, but because of the awkward shape, it means that putting cars at the back would essentially mean that you're losing some space at the front. It might well be an option, but the applicant hasn't put that option forward to us.
And that track is unmade as well.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to come back. Unfortunately, because of the drawing we have in front of us, it doesn't have the red line outline, so it's a bit difficult for us to sort of ascertain exactly where it is. But what you're saying is, although it shows that there is some form of access there, in reality it doesn't really exist as an access point. No.
Not for this site.
No. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
So my point relates to Councillor Hookway's as well. So when I remember the original application, all of the parking was at the front. So where it's shown on the photograph now, but we're showing the photograph at the back. We're saying that cannot be used, or it can be possibly used.
No. Sorry.
That's the one.
So yeah, here. So it's all gated off at the moment. So whilst there is a track on the northern side of that, there's no means of the sites, accessing through here. It's not clear from the application that they have the right to use this. It could be under different ownership. So whilst this area is within the site boundary, and ideally you'd utilise every spare inch for parking on the site, the difficulty is the awkward shape, and that you have to access down here at the moment. unless the applicant tells us otherwise, that they could potentially provide an access point through here.
Sorry, I wasn't thinking to the one on the right. I was actually thinking where you can see the car there. So we're saying that that's not usable then?
You could use here.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
This is within the application site.
Yeah.
So the applicant could provide this area as additional parking. The difficulty is actually how many spaces can you achieve in this area versus how many can you achieve at the front.
Yeah.
Unless you're going to have the same arrangement and just sort of have everybody coming in and blocking everybody in. There's no reason why, we couldn't sort of, suggest that it's clear. They can use that area for parking if they can see a way to make it work with everybody just going in, everybody leaving at the same time, so there's no difficulty with people being blocked in.
Could you just give members a little bit of clarity on whether they can, or the relevance of the conditions that have been suggested with regard to monitoring, air conditioning, sound isolating equipment and so on? So
this is an application to vary condition 3. Actually the applicant wants to remove condition 3. Officers have suggested that we vary condition 3 and allow 30 people to use the gym at any one time. And in doing so, there is an intensification of the use, and that is part and parcel of what condition 3 was referring to at the outset. So potentially, there is potential for the imposition of additional conditions, as long as there is a valid reason for imposing additional conditions that weren't originally proposed on the original application. So it's within members' gift to propose new conditions. We just need to be sure that firstly they weren't already dealt with by the conditions that are going to be reimposed, which will be carried forward, and that there need to be a planning reason for imposing new conditions.
Right, members, we've got an application. I'm sensing that there is a will to support business to allow this to develop, but it is the concern over the impact. But I am in your hands as to whether you have any planning reasons which would substantiate additional conditions being added to help support this application. So I'll come to Councillor Steptoe.
Chair, can I suggest that we add the extra condition, if we increase the number to 30, that the appropriate monitoring equipment is provided by the applicants for our use adjacent to the site to make sure that it doesn't increase the noise levels, etc. And if it does, appropriate action then needs to be taken to bring it back to the correct level.
So I'm not... additional conditions can be imposed. The difficulty with additional conditions is that they need to be very precise. So we need to ensure that the condition meets 5 tests. Just one of those is that it's precise, another that it's enforceable. So what we need to be careful is that we're very clear about exactly what we're asking the applicant to do. Is it ongoing? It needs to be time limited to ensure that if there's any breach going forward, residents, have comfort that we could actually enforce it reasonably.
Okay, go on.
Thank you, Chair. I think the basis is that it makes sure that it does not increase any neighbour disturbance by increasing the numbers.
I think members have been to a variety of venues will have seen noise limiting equipment that will automatically cut the power to amplified music should it go beyond a particular point. Are you, could you give us some detail on that?
Yeah, I think...
and do we need to set a decibel level?
Certainly we'd have to set a decibel level, yes, because the condition needs to be precise. And the issue is, are we looking at it was something just with, because that's the last suggestion was setting something that would cut music within the building if it reached a certain level. I had sort of understood the other suggestion to be something on a boundary, I understand the reason for the condition, and I think that's acceptable, in that we're increasing the intensity of the use and the number of users, potentially, and we're seeking to ensure that there is still a good relationship with the neighbouring residential properties to the north. I think the issue of these wording of these conditions is crucial, and I don't know if it's more.
I think, members, we will struggle to some extent tonight to put precision on levels of volume and so on. It is something that I believe we would take professional officer advice on for environmental health. Go on, one more go.
I was going to suggest the baseline where we had cause to send planning enforcement along to have a look at the existing, that the baseline was set at that point because that wasn't a problem.
Very challenging with that one. Go on, Councillor Hookway.
Thank you, Chairman. On the basis that we are seeking further technical and detailed information, I'm going to propose that this matter be deferred until such time as we receive that.
Before we go to that, can I have clarity from members? Because once we come back with this, if we agree to defer, it will simply to be for the agreement or not of the new proposal. So we are, number one, looking at monitoring equipment to cut off the noise, right? There was a second one.
The possibility of the installation of soundproofing material on the basis of the increase in usage would mean a potential increase in noise.
Well, I think you start to cut across the first one there, because if you're not creating noise louder than a certain point, whether you have the soundproofing level or not, we'll look at the acoustic properties. Councillor FD?
Maybe this might word, the noise should not exceed the decibel level. It needs to be agreed at the boundary used at the boundary of the land occupied or used by the gym.
Right, we start to get a bit challenging there, but go on.
I believe the second point was around air conditioning, and I believe this is because they're opening windows when people get warm working out, etc. If more people are working out, more heat, I suppose, would be generated. Therefore, the want to open the windows would increase. Yeah. I believe Councillor Ward had a point on introducing air conditioning to resolve that. And I wonder if that's something we can attach in a condition.
I agree. It's worth investigation, but wary of air conditioning plant making its own noise. Yes. Low-level distraction. I don't want us just to come up with a random shopping list. Do you want to just comment on the viability of what's been said?
I think in the round, looking at them sort of taken together. So we could perhaps take some advice from our colleagues in environmental health, and then discuss with the applicant what they might be willing to propose or look at in a revised proposal to you, and then bring it back, and we can see if whether we can get some precise conditions that might deal with these issues as we can.
I'm not predetermining in any way the decision that the committee will make, but prior to us going to deferment, the sense that I'm receiving is that providing sufficient safeguards can be put in place on the areas mentioned, the committee is, or the safeguards are outlining the committee's concerns on this item. Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not very happy about deferment because I don't think we should be stringing this out any longer than it is. But once the environmental health have reported back to officers, surely that can be done with agreement with the ward councillors. The ward councillors are here this evening, and we're very aware of our concerns and can work within that parameters.
Councillor Hookway did move for deferment, and he was seconded at this point. So I'm bound to go to that point, but you've made your points. I would hope that we could have a quick turnaround to avoid unnecessary delay, and perhaps by the full January meeting we will be able to bring this one back. So, on the motion to defer this item, based on the discussion that we've had this evening, those members in favour of the deferment, please indicate. Those against the deferment, that item is deferred. Right, again, I'm sorry for the delay at the start. Thank you for your attending, and happy Christmas.